have it. Savage on the set. Oh no, it's the Popo. Ryan Tillman. Let him have it. Savage on the set. AJ. What up, boy? Ryan Tillman. Let him have it. Savage on the set. Oh no, it's the Popo.
Yo, what's going on? Welcome to another episode of the It's Needed podcast, where we discuss real issues involving law enforcement in the community. It's your boy Ryan Tillman, founder of Breaking Barriers United, and I am joined by the light-skinned wonder himself, Mr. Oh No, it's the Popo. What's up, Brody?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You know, back in the day, we used to have like an applause. They used to be like, "Yeah, oh no, it's the Popo." Now it's just like, all right, here you go. Here you go. There you go, Billy. Right? There you go, Billy.
I know, right? Seriously.
Standing ovation.
We got the Savage on the set, like the song says. What up, Billy? What's going on, Brody?
Hello, everybody.
Oh man.
Tomatoes.
Oh, you know he definitely
saved him all for him.
Yeah. And we got two of my other brothers from another mother who have been podcasts before, but this is a special episode. We have never done this before, and it's so dope. Because I got my two brothers, even though they be bullying me. I got my boy Artie Gons on the set, as well as go ahead and give my boy Artie a round of applause. You know, thank you. And we also got my boy Leon Ford, Mr. Leon Bully Ford, on the set. What up, Leon?
What up?
Oh man, this is good. This is good. Somebody said Billy mad cute though.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Every time.
Well, hey guys, it is a pleasure having you guys on. We will do a little bit of the small talk, but man, I can't believe we've been running this podcast for almost 3 years now, and we've had Leon on, we've had Artie on, but we've never had all of us on together. And so we've been talking in the group text and everything. Leon's been bullying me and everything like that. You know, Artie's been peacemaker and all this other stuff. And I was like,
Artie was the peacemaker in that chat. I do got to say that, like, because we was going in. I noticed, like, man, Artie ain't really saying much right now.
That's because Artie was over there laughing at all my jokes, man. You know.
Hey, first off, the bad and bougie one took me out.
Laughing for sure. The bad and bougie
one took me out. But then with that last meme you sent, I was like, oh, I need to go ahead and log out for today. Let me just go ahead.
Man. Hey, Leon's funny though. Leon's funny, but this is what kind of got me baffled. So today I was running a little bit late. So anyways, I call everybody's ready for the podcast. Everybody ready to go. And except Leon. Leon ain't on. Leon's Hollywood. If y'all don't know this, you know, a few years ago when we talked to Leon was still on the come up. Leon Hollywood now. So,
he was at a meet and greet.
Yeah, he was at a meet and greet. I could have swore I heard somebody say, oh yeah, we're going to Miami next or something like that.
I paid for a selfie.
So anyways, I call Leon, and you know, in front of all my friends, in front of Artie, in front of Billy, in front of AJ, I'm like, let me call Leon and get him on because it'll remind him that he has to do it. So I call
speaker.
Now I got him on speakerphone, mind you. I got Leon on speakerphone, so they can all hear me what's going on. So Leon answers the phone. I kid y'all not. Hey, who's this? I was like, wow.
Wow. Hey, skip a beat. Hey, who is this?
Didn't even skip. Hey, who is this? Now I'm feeling stupid because I'm like, hey, it's your bro Ryan. Like we didn't just get off the phone like a couple days ago. So
yeah, I told you what happened, man. Oh my goodness.
He said, Ryan, who?
Yo, man, y'all, that was my cootie moment, man. Like Kanye.
Oh man. So you know, Leon forgetting about the little people. It's all good, man. Hopefully one day I'll be able to be like Leon, get my own personal assistant, be like Artie, chilling in Malibu and stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, it actually over here got worse. It got worse because he was like, who is this? And you were like, it's Ryan. And he goes, which one?
Yeah, Ryan.
Oh man.
Yeah, right.
Then he hung up on him.
Hey, salt to the wound right now.
I don't know if you caught on, but it's Ryan took him off speakerphone immediately.
I showed it. I was like, turn off.
Leon, it's me.
I'm gonna start calling Ryan AJ like when Kanye was calling his boy the wrong name. Like AJ, he's like, no man, it's me. He's like,
hey, no, bro.
It's the alcohol, man. I just got a Grammy, man.
Oh man, I gotta start calling Leon's assistant from here on out, and then we like, hey man, get my assistant. I'll get you on the calendar. So
now, yeah,
anyway,
this is great though, because it's like that people get to see our real relationship, man. There's just so much love and positivity and jokes and everything, man. Whenever I talk to any of y'all,
For sure.
it's just a good time, man. So I'm grateful for that.
For sure.
Bro, that's a good lead in to the conversation today. So for those of you guys that are watching or listening to this in your car or wherever, I was just tripping out. So all 5 of us are on a group text together, and we were just kind of talking about the podcast, setting it up, and it was just funny. We all going in, cracking jokes with each other, going back and forth. And then I was thinking about the dynamics of who's all in this group text together. You know what I mean? And if you guys haven't listened to these episodes, you need to go back and listen to the episodes. We'll already listen to the episode with Leon. We've had them both on twice now. And this is not an episode to kind of tell you their stories just because we've already done that. This is an episode to really talk about the work going forward and what we can do. But as I was thinking about this text message, I was thinking like, this is what the world needs. This is what the United States need, is a big old group text with people like this in it that are able to have real conversations, but have real relationships with everybody.
It's called Twitter.
It is.
It didn't work out very well.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, right,
that is very,
that.
very true. But the dynamics, and so you have 2 police officers. You have the token white guy, Billy, that everybody hates. I just play. Everybody loves Billy. Billy's like, what do you mean? No, everybody loves Billy.
I don't say a word and you come at me. All right.
Then we have Artie. Obviously, Artie. And if you guys don't know about Artie, Artie's was convicted for murder, served 25 years, right, Artie? 25 years of a life sentence.
I feel like you'll never get this right, bro. But 21 years.
21 years. 21 years.
My bad. Years, bro. 21.
Well, I'm just
adding extra
bro.
years.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever. Whatever. My bad. You know what I meant. Everybody knew what I was talking about. So we had Artie, who was convicted of murder, served 21 years of a life sentence, got out and just has transformed his life beyond measure, doing phenomenal work. And then we have Leon, who was shot 5 times by police, paralyzed from the waist down, and it just started a nonprofit with multiple police officers. And if I'm not mistaken, he started it in collaboration with one of the shot officers that shot him, if I'm not mistaken. Am I right in saying that, Leon?
No, it's the chief of police.
The chief of police.
Yeah, I co-founded with the chief of police. Yep.
Perfect. So he started a nonprofit with the chief of police of the agency that shot him. And so I'm sitting here as we're having this group text, and I'm just like, wow, like, who would have ever thought that all of us would be connected and be friends and just see? I mean, there's so many similarities between us all. We're all like brothers, but we all have different outlooks and different viewpoints. And I was like, this is what the world needs. This is what change actually looks like. And that's what we're not seeing. So anyways, I just wanted to lead us off with that. This is going to be a powerful episode, so you don't want to miss this. We might actually make this a 2-part episode because I don't want to take away from the value that we can bring you guys. So with that being said, I watched the video today, and this is going to kind of set the conversation off. I literally was driving to the studio today. Somebody sent me this video on Instagram. Yes, I was watching it while I was driving. Forgive me, y'all. I know that was terrible on me, but it really, I think God works in mysterious ways. It was an interesting segment that I watched, and I was like, man, this is a great lead into a conversation that we can have today. So Billy, go ahead and cue up the video. We'll play it, and then I want to have a discussion based around this video. So go ahead and play the video.
Plea to help find the shooter. First things first, we got to give you our...
Gianno Caldwell learned that his youngest brother had been shot and killed on the South Side.
Gianno is here with us this morning with the plea to help find the shooter. First things first, we got to give you our sincerest condolences and thoughts and prayers absolutely with your family.
Thank you so much.
What do you know about what happened?
My younger brother on Friday morning was outside of a venue on 114 South Vincennes, right across the street from a church, when 3 to 4 men came out of a black SUV, 3 or 4 men with dreads, and they started shooting. And there was about 50 shell casings on the scene. 2 other individuals hit, one a young lady, and a man who's been in critical condition and apparently has to have multiple surgeries.
You know it's difficult for you.
To say heartbroken wouldn't even measure it. My family's shattered right now. The fact that this continues to happen in this city, one in which I grew up in, one in which I love, is utterly disappointing, disgusting. There's no value for human life here. That value has been eroded over the years. living in Chicago should not come with a death sentence, but it does for so many people that live here. It used to be a time where the violence was concentrated on the south and west sides, but you can walk out of the studio and something happens. That tells me that something needs to change urgently.
Yeah.
If it wasn't my little brother, would I be getting all this coverage for him? Would people even know his name? No. What about the 5-month-old girl who was just murdered on Friday? People don't really even know her name. It's just the fact that it happened to an infant that we're reading about it. But this has become to the point that people have become desensitized to the violence and the murders that take place in here.
Yeah.
So he actually goes on to say, and I don't know if I think we cut it off a little bit short, but it's all good. He goes on to talk about the forgiveness of it, and he said he even has forgiveness in his heart for the person that committed the murder of his little brother. Not to say that he shouldn't be held accountable, but he said that there's a place for rehabilitation in that person's life, and he believes that rehabilitation is possible for those that have committed, an act like that, a senseless act like that, and that it can, that those people can benefit others who have gone down that straight path. And so why I thought this was such an interesting conversation is because between me, Artie, and Leon, we've all had this conversation. If you guys haven't subscribed to either one of these guys, make sure you guys follow them. But Artie, I'm gonna go to you first. You just recently did your first series or first segment of a longer series called Lessons from a Lifer. And in that series, I watched it. It was a phenomenal episode. You guys talk a lot about this idea of forgiveness and, how you got to a place of forgiveness, how Leon got to a place of forgiveness. And then me and AJ, obviously we're in a unique place because we are on the other side of the law, I guess you can say, and we see things and hear things and all this other stuff. So Artie, I want to go to you. Like, what is it? What are we going to do? How do we navigate situations like we just saw? And one of the things he said specifically was nobody would actually know his name. I guess this guy is an influencer, or I don't know, I don't know who he is, but he actually kind of, has some type of influence, which is why he said if nobody knew who I was, then nobody would know my little brother's name or anything like that. So Artie, I'm going to go to you first, man. What do we do to kind of navigate this tough situation?
Speaking from just the standpoint of my own background, I would just have to say they are in the initial grips of this. So that's different than having a conversation with someone like him 20 years down the road. This just happened. And although it is something that seems to be continuously happening, we're talking about this case in particular. And this just happened. So this is raw. This is fresh. Like these people are brokenhearted right now. And I take myself back and I try to remember who I was when I committed my crime, what my thoughts were. A lot of the violence that you're seeing in Chicago is similar to the violence I grew up with in my neighborhood in the Bay Area in California. So it's always been there. And I hate to say it, we call it a cultural thing, but it is. And it's sad that we call it that. And I can go on a whole diatribe about what's wrong with that. But I will say that I take myself back, man, and I think about it. And when I was the guy who was jumping out of this SUV, there was no remorse. There was no thoughts about what am I doing wrong. Not necessarily taking into consideration the lives that I'm affecting. At that age, I just didn't think about those kinds of things. And at that stage of my life, I was not equipped to actually think about those kinds of things. And I just victimized. And it's sad because this is a child's life that has been taken. And it's sad that it takes these kinds of cases to actually bring it to our attention in the first place.
Yeah.
But what I would say is to have someone say that this early on in the process, like I actually believe redemption is still possible for the person who committed this offense, says a lot about that person. Because most of the victims and survivors of crime I've met, when I asked them about like their initial stages of going through this, that was not present. It was anger, it was resentment, it was a demand for vengeance and just what we call justice in this country. And that was front and center. So it
Yeah.
says a lot about him, but it's still really sad that you have to have that capacity and be that kind of person in this world that we live in. Like, you shouldn't be required to suffer something like this and be the bigger person and forgive. You know,
Yeah.
it's great. And Leon and I had a great conversation about forgiveness, but how sad is it that someone has to actually go through that process in the first place?
That's a good point. Leon, I mean, for you, already brought up a point of being a culture. And we had a conversation about this the other day about this cultural, idea that and AJ knows a lot about this too, because AJ works in the inner city. There's this cultural phenomenon that we are ingrained to live this certain lifestyle, or certain people are ingrained to live a certain lifestyle, live this gangster lifestyle. How do we change that? How do we get out of this point to where, we're going against the grain and we don't have to do what, my big brother, my uncle, or my cousins are doing? How do we get to the point where we say enough is enough and start, trying to build the community as opposed to tear it down? And it's hard because, I think A already mentioned it. There is a systematic problem. When I talk about systematic issue, that's where I think there are really systematic problem is that we've never, or a lot of people in the inner city have never really been trained to know anything other than the neighborhood. So what are your thoughts on that, Leon?
Yeah, so it's deep for me because when I think about, the hood in Pittsburgh or in Atlanta, Miami, in the Bay, in LA, when we talk about culture, I think is directly connected to, poverty, right? And whether it's poor Black people, poor Hispanic people, poor Indigenous people, poor white people. When people are faced with poverty and they're forced to survive, people don't always, have the resources to, do the right thing or think, in a way that that will add value to their lives. There's a quote that I really appreciate, and it reads, when the flower doesn't bloom, you fix the environment in which it grows, not the flower." And when you talk about gun violence and you try to fix the flower, which is like one young person at a time or one person from the community at a time, the environment is still creating, this organized chaos or disorganized chaos in a way where you could almost assume that in some city around the country right now, somebody just got a phone call that somebody that they loved was killed, right? So that's systemic, you know what I mean? And culture is a byproduct, from my perspective, of a system that created a culture, right? And so, a solution for me, that I always think about is one, mental health. I have loved ones that are serving life sentences right now. Some for homicide, right? They were convicted of homicide. And they aren't bad people. They just made a split second decision that completely changed their lives. And most of them were victims of violent crimes as young people, right? I think about, the friends that lost their dad to gun violence, or lost uncles or cousins, or even me. Like, my first person close to me that I lost was my cousin. I was 5 years old the first time I went to a funeral. And then when I was 11 years old, my best friend, his name was Stephen Tibbs. He was 13 years old, where he was killed in a drive-by, mistaken identity. And so, like, when you have people experiencing PTSD, from this trauma that they experience, now they grow up, and we hear it all the time through music, through we hear it through, maybe through some of our loved ones. It's like, yo, I'd rather be judged by 12 than carried by 6, right? And that's no different than in policing, right? Police officers being trained to, like, yo, you have to make it home at night. Well, if you're trained that you have to make it home at night, there's this perceived threat. What is the threat? And then, when you believe that there are threats out there, you're more likely to pull a firearm to protect yourself. And that's what we find in communities. People view threats in their neighborhoods, and, there's a lot of trauma. And so, to prevent their lives from being taken, out of fear, you put somebody in a position where they take a life. The second thing outside of the mental health piece is how do you build an economy, right? How do you help people make money so that they can take care of themselves and their families. And there's so much data out there about how crime is connected to poverty. So between investing in communities, investing in the people from an economic perspective, and also a mental health perspective, I think that we will see a lot less violence in specific communities.
That's good. What you got, AJ?
Man, I don't know why I got to go after both of them. You should let me go first. No, they both bring up really good points, but I want to point out two things that he said during that interview. The first of which is he said living in Chicago should not come with a death sentence, and the second on the 5-month-old that was killed. And I don't know if you all seen that headline or not, but they were saying that the 5-month-old, I believe, was shot and killed. And it's just resonating because of the age, but it just really goes to show you the environment that some of these people are forced to live and work in, and their family and friends live and work in those environments. And I can't help but think, especially after hearing what Artie and Leon said about what it was like for me growing up, and the things that I unfortunately had to witness. The same thing as Leon, at the age of 11, going to funerals. And when I was 13, one of my really good friends, D'Angelo Hall, killed himself. And, he was clearly just, facing a lot of mental health issues, but he was also wrapped up in a lot of things because of that. And I think, what allowed me to get out of that situation? Like what was the fork in the road moment for me? Because I was down that path. Like, it wasn't even like I approached the fork in the road and made a decision. I approached the fork in the road and I started going the wrong way, and then realized, like, well, hold on, I got to track back a little bit, realize where I went off, and then go back. And what it was for me, there was an educational piece that I had. And that educational piece was also mixed with a support that I also didn't have. And that was the mentor that came into my life, right? Like, I was going to be homeless. He opened his doors to me. I moved in with him. So that removed me from my environment that I was in. And then he started educating me on like what his life was like and why it was that way. And I credit that combination of two things, having that support in my life and then having that education as well, for me being the person that I am. So I just can't imagine like what Chicago, just we'll stick with the video. What Chicago would look like if every single person in that area had that. Like, if they had that educational support, educational piece and support piece.
Man, that's interesting. And situations like this, there's so many layers to it. There's so many layers because, like already mentioned before, like, this is just the beginning. So it's fresh. There's a lot of emotions, obviously for the victim's family, but also for the people that did it, whether they're in custody or not. I want to transition really quick and talk about what accountability looks like. There's this whole idea, and a lot of times we get accountability wrong, if you ask me. The reason I'm bringing this up is I was having a conversation with somebody recently, and the conversation came up when it came to do you guys remember the officer from Oklahoma that accidentally killed the suspect because she thought she shot him with a taser, but it was a gun? You guys remember that situation?
Yep.
So that officer, she had been on the force for 27 years, actually had a really good track record, nothing else, no other complaints in her, nothing. And so I think her maximum exposure was about, I want to say 7 to 8 years is what she could have got. They found her guilty and they sentenced her to about a year and some months. I think it was like 18 months or something like that. There were some people out there that was saying that was not enough time. I said that it was enough time. And for me, I was thinking, and this is my mindset was like, look, this lady had never did anything before. It was a legitimate, honest to God mistake. Now, it doesn't excuse us. And I've said this plenty of times before, as officers, we don't have that luxury to make mistakes sometimes. We don't have the luxury to make a mistake like that in this profession. We just don't. So she did what she did. She got punished, but she's got her punishment. And I thought it was okay. But I had people saying that, well, could you, as a victim, would you be able to say that a year is enough time? Or, they were just saying that it wasn't enough time. And, you can go back to the other situation where Remember the officer that went into the wrong apartment and killed the guy sitting on his couch? Well, that victim's brother came out and gave that girl a hug in the courtroom because he also realized it was a legitimate mistake and he had a heart of forgiveness. And so how do we figure out what is enough time when a person has done such a horrendous crime? Because I don't think it's a one size fits all solution. And, you know, in that situation involving the lady with the officer with the taser, I thought it was enough just because I'm like, hey, look, like she had a clean trial. Like this girl did nothing. Like in her mind, she absolutely did everything right. And in that split second of a moment, she did the wrong thing, which has happened. And this was not the first time. We all know this. There's officers have made the same mistake. She was induced distress. The guy wasn't listening, and so forth and so on. So I asked you guys, how do we determine what the appropriate amount of accountability is like when it comes to the sentencing process after a person has made a mistake? I'll go back to you, Artie, because you've been on that, and go to Leon again.
This is okay. So if you want to talk about accountability, you have to get away from the focus on time. If all you're focusing on is the amount of time someone gets when they're sentenced or found guilty, you're missing the whole point, and you're actually moving away from accountability. We have actually made the amount of time equal accountability in this society, and that's where we're wrong. And it's the interesting part is that those who would say she didn't get enough time are typically people on my side of the fence, who would feel like, if it would have been me, I would have got a life sentence. But if it's a white police officer, she's going to get, it's usually us, right? That has this argument. But we're also the same ones who say you cannot mass incarcerate yourself out of this problem. And we are anti-mass incarceration. We are anti-life sentences, anti-death penalty, all these things. But yet, if it's her, give her life, and that's the level of hypocrisy I deal with on my side, right? Just holding myself and my people accountable on our side, right? It's not about the time. And we have to move away from that. What it is about, it's about the surviving victims, their family members, their communities. It's about what they need after something like this has occurred. And our system does not ask victims' families or victims' relatives or the community, what do you need to heal? That's the component that's missing from our justice system. Take a case where someone has murdered somebody else, and the person who committed this crime is sentenced to the death penalty. And the victim's family tells the district attorney, we're anti-death penalty. Like, we want justice, but we don't want the death penalty for this person. That's not what we are for. It's not what the victim would have been about. So we don't support that. In this country, they're going to ignore what the family wants, and they're still going to proceed with that death penalty verdict. And they're still going to put that person on death row because we're missing the point. We're calling accountability punishment and vengeance rather than what actually is accountability, something that leads to healing, a reduction of harm. So for me, it's like taking the focus off of that part of it and actually putting our eyes on what matters most. And that is what do we need after something like this has occurred?
Would you say that there's a level, and I'm going to get to you too very quickly on, but would you say that there's a level of also taking things into, like taking it all into consideration? For example, one of the things I've seen a lot recently is you have a lot of repeat offenders coming out and committing some of these very violent crimes. And a lot of the argument is like, this person was allowed to come out and then they reoffended. And not only did they reoffend, but they committed one of the most heinous acts. And so now it's like, because you did the first time, they were able to come out there. And I think on Thursday, they're going to be the two El Monte police officers that were just killed and ambushed. The guy that actually killed them was convicted on robbery, let out pretty quickly. And that's the guy that went out and committed the ambush. So there's got to be a balance, I would imagine. And this, in my mind, I could be wrong. And again, I want to go to Leon, but there's got to be a balance because there are some people, again, if you look at the totality, if this person,
I do want to talk about this though, because what you're getting into right now is a different level of accountability, and there's levels to this, and there's different forms of accountability. So I definitely want to jump in after about that.
Oh no, for sure, and hold that because I want to hear, I want to learn. But in my mind, that's what it should be, and I think it should be. The thing about our justice system is we've kind of created it to where we wanted it to make it a one size fits all, but it's not a one size fits all because every individual is different. Every individual, what they're doing, whether reoffending, they're not first time offense, not second time offense. Every situation is different, and so I think we should be looking at it through that lens, coupled with what you're talking about, Artie, is like, what does the victim want? What does the victim want in this situation? And if you take all those things into accountability, then now you come up with, okay, what is the appropriate? This is going to be the appropriate level of punishment, accountability, whatever we want to call it, based on all these things. This is a first time offense. We've spoken with the family. The family said this, and now what we've come to is this process, and this is what you're going to get. But what we've done is we kind of left a lot of those things out, and we say, you know what, based on the maximum exposure and this and that, this person is going to get 25 years to life. This person is going to get out, and I think we're missing that part. Leon, I'm gonna go to you, and then Artie, keep that thought because I want to hear what you have to say about that.
Yeah, well, I'm not an attorney, and so I struggle with the question of like how much time someone should get or what accountability um, should look like. What I will say is that I have been a victim of crime. Right, I lost family members, relatives to gun violence, and I, observe people who have caused harm to my family um, get convicted and sentenced to life sentences. And as someone who's on that side, I will say that that conviction did not make my family feel any better about the loss, right? I've also been in situations where people I love were convicted, and that really hurt me. You know what I mean? And even before, like, my consciousness elevated. I was angry at the system and the other family for my loved one being sentenced for so much time. And so I think, like I said, I'm not an attorney, and I know this isn't what the judicial system was created for, but I would love to see, the facilitation of healing, right? Because, again, to go back to the question about the environment, when the flower doesn't bloom, you fix the environment in which it grows, not the flower. So what are the, different issues causing people to become repeat offenders, right? Is it a mental health thing? Is it a poverty thing? Like, I think when we address systems, and why people make decisions that they are making, we can help communities heal, and through helping those communities heal, that's where you see the long-term reduction of crime. When you just try to lock other people up and the environment is still sick, and you still have people who may not have even been exposed to crime, you know, becoming, people who break the law, it's something wrong with the environment. And so I like to focus my time on the solutions. And I think the solution is, how about we talk to the people, committing crimes, in a very open and honest way where they can fully be vulnerable and transparent about the decisions that they're making. And then how do we tailor solutions to prevent people from, feeling like they have to commit acts of violence or just, break the law. How do we prevent that?
That's good. That's good. Back to you, Artie, because I know you had something as well. And then AJ,
Yeah,
if you got a
so
question for that.
it is about this layered thing, right? This repeat offender that we're using, this person who's committed repeated offenses that we are using in this example. When this person went in the first time, actually, let me start by just saying, because you guys both know I've said this. I think that we should be working towards a world where we don't need policing and life sentences and all that? Shouldn't that be the goal for every world, right? I totally 100% support us working towards that. In reality, I do not believe that we should just be wiping the police off the face of the map. I don't think so. And I know that there are some cases where someone needs to be removed from society for the safety and security of the people in the community. So I'm someone who did a life sentence, and I'm telling you that I do support, in some cases, people being incarcerated and being removed from society because they're just not there yet. They're not productive. They're not trying to change internally, and they're dealing with all of that systemic stuff that Leon's talking about in here. Like they're born with it, right? So until that's addressed, yeah, I definitely support that. That being said, right, we're talking about layers here. The repeat offender that we're using in this example went in and was in there. Now, what happened when that person was in there? This is where we as a society can step up and hold ourselves accountable. And that's the component that's missing. We only see accountability on a surface level. Lock them up, sentence them, put them away. The crime has been punished and justice has been served. End of story. Case closed. But we know that's not the truth, because wherever that person is from, like Leon said, that neighborhood is still sick. That community is still sick. It's still going through it. It's still experiencing the things it's experiencing. You remove 2 people who commit murder off the street, 20 more ready to go. There's always soldiers behind them, and you as police officers know that. Like, and we talked about that before too, right? The pouring of the water and like trying to like shovel, and you just can't, like, it feels like it's endless. But the reason it's endless is because we as a society are not doing enough to hold ourselves accountable and to say, what role do we play in how this systemically keeps happening to us? What role do we play? What are we doing to transform these communities, to actually let people know they have purpose and they have, and that they matter, that they actually have love within themselves, that they were meant to do greater things with their lives? What are we doing to address these mental health issues, drug addictions, things of that nature? Most of the repeat offenders I knew were a lot of property crimes as well. A lot of these guys were stealing and like and doing robberies and things like that because they were feeding another problem, which was usually a drug addiction or something like that, right? People don't just join a gang because they feel great in life. They join a gang because they're seeking peer acceptance and peer approval that they're not getting from family or from community. That's exactly why I joined. And the moment that started to change for me was when I started to realize that I had more value than I understood. And I only realized that when a freaking CO, man, basically an officer, told me one time in the visiting room that the life I was living was not reality and I was meant to be doing more with my life. And it took like 5 years or more for what he told me to catch up to me. I never forgot what he said though, man. He told me it in the visiting room when I was at the height of my gang leadership. I was at the height of my political career as a gang member. And it stuck with me. And like years later, it finally dawned on me. But see, what he did there is systemically what I'm talking about. He had enough wherewithal to be like, I know I didn't commit this person's crime. I don't have anything to do with him. But as a member of society, I need you to know you're supposed to be doing something else. That's accountability. And I don't think we're going to those levels, man.
Yeah. AJ, what do you think? Because again, from the blue side, I mean, when I say the blue side, meaning like the law enforcement side, it's a hard one, especially when you know, like when we deal all the time with people that are what we call repeat offenders. And this one, like I said, Thursday coming up is a funeral for those 2 officers, and it's very tragic. I think one of them was about a 17 or 18-year-old vet with the police department, and the other officer literally was about a year on, a little bit over a year and a half. They both leave behind, I think, a total of 5 kids between the 2 of them. And they pulled up on scene and some guy ambushed them. And so obviously it's already bad enough that they were ambushed and killed. But what makes it worse is when you find out who this person was and how he was out on the streets. You know, if you have the families of those officers on this podcast right now, I think they would be from a place where I want maximum exposure. Like I want maximum time. But kind of going to your point is like what Leon was saying. And I've heard this before, and I actually posed that same argument to some people, is like, how do we even know the victims, even if they get a sentence, it's not going to bring their loved one back. So it's not, we like to think that it's going to fill this gap in their heart. Like, oh, I'm better now because the person got life sentence or he got the death penalty, but it's still not going to bring their loved one back. So AJ, what do you think? What is the right the answer? What is the solution to criminal justice reform? What is the solution? I mean, and I'll be honest, I'm not a fan, and I think, I don't know if me and Artie agree or disagree. I'm not a fan of the current DA in LA County, just because I think we went from one extreme to the other extreme. And then I think, people become part of this political agenda to where we become a lot more, we want to please, we want to do stuff because we think it's pleasing to get elected, but it's not always the right thing. So AJ, what is your opinion about, or how do we solve this crime, or how do we solve this problem when it comes to people that are doing, reoffending, and then, people getting actually rehabilitated, like my boy Artie and other people that I know that have?
Yes, I'll touch on a few things, just really quick. I've sat in plenty of courtrooms where the verdict has come out, and not the verdict, but the sentence has come out, and family members have been devastated. Like, family members of victims have been devastated. I think Leon's phone died, by the way. Have been devastated because they felt like the offender did not get what they thought or think he or she should have gotten. But like, as we said before, like there's so many layers to this. So like, let me just share 3 really quick examples. When I first got on the department, there was a kid. He was young. He's probably like 13, maybe. But he was just bad. Like, he was just always wrapped up in like these gangbangers, like holding dope for him. He would grab their pistol and hide it. Like, anytime the police came up, be caught in like stolen cars, like all that stuff. And he was just very much headed down the wrong path.
Mm-hmm.
Poured into him. I poured into him. Years and years and years. He just graduated high school, on honor roll, got his life together. Like, I'm so proud of this young man, but I spent so much time and energy with him, his family, his influencers, his coaches, his teachers, like, you name it. His coach had my cell phone number, mom, uncle, best friends, neighbors, the corner store market person, like, all these people have my number. I'm like, always give me updates on this man. Give you another example. I met a young lady who was same exact deal, like, just wrapped up in all this stuff, was in stolen cars, constantly getting in fights, getting expelled. I did the same thing. I poured into her, and it wasn't working. And like, nothing I would do was working. And maybe it was because she didn't relate to me as much as this young man did, because he was a man and I'm a man, or whatever. She's a female, but it got to the point where I asked her. I said, "Who's like your celebrity? Like who's your person you would freak out like if you met?" And she said, "This female rapper." So I did a video and I posted it on Twitter and Instagram, and I tagged the rapper and I said, "Hey, if you get this message, if you get this video, message me." And she messaged me, and I said, "Hey, do me a favor. I want to make this girl a deal, and the deal is, if she doesn't get into a fight for the rest of the school year," keep in mind, we were halfway into the school year already, and all she doesn't have to do is get into a fight. If she doesn't get into a fight for the rest of the year, will you set up like a time to meet with this young lady, or send some gear or a personalized video or whatever? And she was like, "Absolutely. I'll get her friends tickets to the next concert. I'll get her backstage. I'll sign all sorts of merch for her, everything." So I'm like, bet. So I do this. I do another video with the young lady. Like, look, I'm showing her the messages, like the girl's crying, like, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe this." And I'm like, all you got to do is not fight, but just know I got people that's going to tell on you the moment you get into a fight, teachers, friends, the neighborhood. Like, all you have to do is not get into a fight. The next weekend, my phone was blowing up videos of her getting into a fight. She instigated the entire thing from start to finish. People were sending me the video. So I was frustrated because it didn't work. The next example I'll give, and I'll make it quick, is I worked on a plain clothes assignment where we were tasked with arresting like violent criminals, people who are known to like inflict violence on people, murderers, those type of people, right? We arrest a guy with a gun, and we know that this guy has shot at people before. Like, he's a known gangbanger, known drug dealer. We arrest him with a gun. The very next month, he's out. We arrest him with a gun again. The week later, after we arrest him with that gun, we get him with another gun. About 4 or 5 months pass. We arrested him with. This is not an exaggeration by any means. I'll send you the whatever it's called.
AJ is like, I got to send y'all just to prove to y'all.
I'll send you the receipts. Yeah, I 1000% send you the receipts. But he's in federal prison right now. You know why? Because he tried to kill somebody. He shot up a car, shot a bunch of people in a car, and he tried to kill people after we caught him with a gun time and time again. So when we talk about accountability from the law enforcement standpoint, I do believe that we have to remove people from communities. Like, I believe if you live in a community and you're causing harm to that community, it is our job as law enforcement to remove you from that situation and place you. The reality of it is in jail. What happens from that point on is out of our hands. But in the same breath, I do see the value in pouring into people, right? Like this young man who is now a man that I poured into when he was a kid. I believe that I was able to help sway him in the right direction because of the time and energy that I put into him. But in the same breath, I have a lot of instances where I've tried to do the exact same thing and it has not worked. The same guy that I arrested with the gun, there was a video of me sitting beside him in front of a trap house. It's just me. And I'm talking to him like, man, like, what are you doing, bro? Like, you're throwing your life away. Like, I could tell you're a good person. Like, you wouldn't be sitting here listening to me if you were not. Like, you would have wrote me off a long time ago. And he's just sitting there kind of bombing his head the whole time, like soaking it in. And then afterwards, he had a conversation with me like, you know, I really look up to you, blah, blah, blah. But like, it just didn't work. So like, for me, I do believe that there has to be some sort of consequence for your actions. Like, there has to be some sort of consequence for your actions. And what that looks like, it's tough. It varies. It varies. But like, I know if I lived in a community where somebody was, you know, a repeat offender, whether it's gun, drugs, or whatnot, like, I would be upset if that person kept coming back to my community and nothing happened to that person.
Yeah. And one of the things that I've said too is like, there are a lot of people, there are people obviously like Artie that when they're in that right space and they're ready to listen, they can absolutely be rehabilitated.
Yeah.
There's another guy that we're going to have on the podcast here soon named Damon West. And I was telling Artie about Damon. I met Damon a few weeks ago and he very similar. Damon was able to be rehabilitated, changed, and now he's out there changing the world, just like Artie is changing the world. But there are also people that are not at that place yet. And so what we've done is we don't know how to balance things. And that's actually kind of how I see a lot of issues in society. Like, society lacks balance. We get caught up in it's either this way or it's that way, and there's no in between. And I truly believe that for a majority of things, we can find an in between, but we've been led astray by social media and by a lot of these news networks that you need to pick a side. And that's what's so frustrating is that when you get caught up in this place where you got to pick a side, you lose perspective and you lose the balance. And what balance is for me is balance is taking everything into consideration and context. And from that context, you make an educated decision based on a whole bunch of different influences that cause you to make that decision. You know what I mean? As opposed to just saying, you know what, they did this, they get that. You do this, you do this, you get this. And so, you know, I'm a huge believer, even more so now, of this idea of rehabilitation because I've met Artie, because I've met Damon, and a whole bunch of other people, because I met, what's the other boy's name, Artie, that I met at the set when I went with you? I need to hit him
Andy.
up, actually.
So
Andy.
Yes,
Andy.
Yeah, no, I got him a job. He's now working security on film sets.
Nice.
Yeah, with the company that we use. So, you know, talk about pouring into somebody, you know, like he's doing great. He's working.
Yeah. And that's another thing, man. Like,
but he struggles. There's a lot of work that has to go into him.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So back in May, I didn't mean to cut you off. Sorry. But I just wanted to so back in May, I got a message, and I got a message on one of my social media pages from somebody I arrested, like, and sent to prison for a couple of years. Known drug dealer, super feared in the community, like just always had that reputation. He sent me a message. He's like, man, I got my life together, but I need help. I'm like, what you need help with, man? And he's like, I need a job. I can't find a job. And man, I've been asking around like crazy, and I literally cannot find this man a job. And he is begging me like, please, bro, like if anybody could do it, you could do it. So I do see it from that end too. I'm like, man, this is frustrating because I
and,
believe
and,
this
and,
man.
and that's the thing. And that's the thing. It's like I've talked to a buddy of mine. I've talked to a buddy of mine named Doug, and Doug is very, very, very good guy. And he's contributes a lot to this idea of criminal reform and criminal justice reform. And one of the things that we talk about is these people, once they get labeled or once they get a record that have a felony on their record, they can't go out and get work. And so it's like on one end, and I get it. I'm a firm believer that, hey, if you did something, there's a level of consequence. It's like anything with my kids. You do something. I told you not to do something.
Right.
I got it. There's got to be a level of correction because I can't have you doing the same thing over again, because the same thing over again could get you hurt, could get somebody else hurt. And so there's got to be a level of correction. But at the same time, I also have to be educating them through the correction so that way they know why they can't do it again. And so when you have these people that go in there, they get in trouble, they've served their time, they've done their time like you already. When they come out, yeah, they've been labeled as a felon, but we should be able to allow them to get more opportunities in order to go make a living for themselves if they've proven that they deserve it. And I say if, because there's some that they use the system for whatever it is. Oh shoot, I'm doing the minimum amount of time. Boom, I'm back at it. I'm about to hit these streets, and there you go again. It's like the revolving door. But those that come out like your boy AJ or people that already may know or something, like those that legit, they need help getting a job. And there's a part of the system is, as a convicted felon, it's almost impossible for you to get a job. So how can you blame a person that's going out there and reoffending because they can't go out there and make a living for themselves because of what they did? So again, balance, taking everything into context. When you have people like that come out, now maybe you reevaluate them, you assess them. Where are you at? What are you doing? Do you have a plan? Have we put things in place for you to create a plan? And then if you're showing, okay, man, I'm proving to myself, but I'm not giving it to you. I'm not saying, hey, here's a job. I'm making you earn it. But if you've shown your willingness and commitment to say, hey, look, I'm going to do it A, B, C, D, and E, then yeah, now I'm going to throw you a bone. Now I'm going to give you a job here. Now I'm going to give you a job there. So that's where I think we need to go in society is being able to have a balancing approach, being able to reevaluate people and say, hey, look, like, what is this person's about? Who are you coming? Actually taking a look at the person as opposed to the offense that they committed. I think that is a huge thing because I think you'll get more from just actually evaluating that person, their environment, where they come from and what they're doing than the actual what crime it shows on paper. Because when you take in all that into consideration, now it's a lot easier to determine whether or not, you know what, hey, this guy, yeah, we may need to lock him up for about 6-7 years, whatever, based on, hey, he's been doing A, B, C, D, and E. We've given him time to get in, and if he's shown that he doesn't want to learn, and therefore he's becoming a danger to not only himself but society. But if this is a first-time offender, this was the context of his offense, this is why he did it, blah 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 blah. Maybe you reduce his time, and so maybe that's the balanced approach. I don't know, but I thought this was a really good discussion to have because right now our society lacks it. I mean, you could look at Chicago, and sadly, we've had this discussion on the podcast before. I feel like a lot of people that are committing these crimes, they're feeling empowered because of the what's the word for it? The fact that they know they are not going to be punished by their actions because of the system of where it is right now. So yeah. I've had people tell me, AJ's had the same thing. People tell them like, shoot, I went out and did it because I know I'll go in tomorrow and I'll be back out doing the same old thing. Well, that tells me there's a problem. When they laugh in your face, they're like, whatever. Like, because there is no type of correction. Go ahead, Artie.
Well, I have to say, I don't believe that. When I committed my crime, I basically told people, I know I'm getting a life sentence. It wasn't I'm getting out tomorrow. It was a life sentence. And I was basically like, I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not afraid of doing time. I'm not afraid of going to prison. You know why? Because culturally, I have been conditioned to believe that's where I'm supposed to be anyway, because of my uncles and my family members and everybody like that. It was a badge of honor for me to go to prison. So you're dealing with people who do not fear those repercussions. And I want to say, you guys know, you can't force me to take any sides. That's one of my whole things too. I'm not anti-cop. I love you guys. You guys know that. Something happens to my family. Who am I calling first? Right away. I need the
Mhm.
cops at my door right now,
ASAP.
and we got to figure this out, right?
Artie's gonna call
So
Billy to call the police because he knows that they might get a quicker
A
response.
little faster.
yeah, exactly.
Hey Billy, hey bro, I got an emergency right now. I need you to call 911 for me. Here's
I
my
need you to
address.
do it. They're gonna, yeah, 'cause they're coming right away as soon as Billy calls. You know,
Yeah.
but I will say that we are very short-sighted in our vision on this as a society, because think about it this way. This is very sad, but you lost 2 officers. 2 officers were murdered, right? I'm against violence against police. I don't support that. Most people I know don't support that. That's not, you don't respond violence with violence.
Mm.
It's been proven. It's just not, it doesn't work, right? Historically, it just doesn't work. All it does is foment more violence. That's all it does.
Yeah.
Right.
But sadly, 2 police officers have been murdered and lost their lives. If we were in a true system of accountability, we would be asking ourselves, starting with us 3 and then going outward, what can we do to make sure this doesn't happen to the next 2 cops after them? Because
Mhm.
there will be 2 more cops after them. We know this for a fact. It's going to happen. And the problem is that we are so short-sighted that we can't actually see that we got to this point where we are at in society with the way that people think, that badge of honor. I'm wearing my oppression and my trauma lifestyle. I'm living it as a badge of honor. I got all these gold chains on me. I got this blicky. I'm just right. That's like something that we are proud of. So there's no fear there. And we've gotten ourselves to a point where it's going to take a very long time to turn that around. But it will never turn around if we don't start investing in what it actually means to be accountable. It just won't. And another cop will die, and another cop will die, and another cop will die. And it's because that extra layer is not being added to the system of accountability. It just isn't. People in your communities, let's just talk about yours, Ryan, like the community that you are working in, right? Just that one alone. If we're doing work in communities where people are being reconditioned to actually feel like they have some sort of responsibility for their community, they actually feel some sense of value, that's when things start to change for themselves. And that's when I was talking about harm reduction. I'm talking about you and I, all of us know people who were abused at home and ended up abusing later in life. I got beat up a lot when I was a kid. I grew up in a very abusive household, and that led to me harming other kids at school, and that led to me harming animals, and then later in life that ended in the ultimate harm, right?
Yeah.
So, but it starts with the initial harms that we face in our communities that have nothing to do with me going to jail or running into law enforcement. This was happening to me when I was 4 years old, 5 years old, 6 years old, before I even seen you guys in blue. I was already being victimized and harmed. You know what I mean? So I'm just saying that there's layers to this that need to be addressed. And I feel like as a society, we're such a instant gratification society that we just don't have the will to like invest in the years that it would take to actually undo the trauma and the layers that have been caused over time.
What was it that rehabilitated you, Artie?
I always tell people the biggest transformational aspect that came into my life was when I took my victim impact course. It was like a victims awareness course. And it was the first time that I was put into a room with survivors of crime. And I had to sit in the same room with someone who's telling me how she was raped while she slept, and she was woken up in the middle of the night and she was raped. And this person got away, and was never brought to justice. Right. Um, that I don't care who you are or how tough you think you are, that will break you. And that was the first time I ever cried in another room, in a room full of men, was hearing these stories in person. But more than that, this is what I'm talking about. I was then challenged by the instructor who said, if this were to happen to your little sister, what would you do? And my first response was, I'm going to go find who did this to my little sister and I'm going to kill them. And everyone to a man in that room said the same thing. And you know what she told me? She said, so you're going to victimize your sister twice. She's now been raped, and you're now doing life, and she's going to blame herself for you being incarcerated for the rest of your life because of what happened to her. Your first thought wasn't, what does my sister need? Are you okay? Can we get you to a hospital? Have you called the cops? You know, those steps I immediately skipped and went right to vengeance. And in doing so, I neglected my sister's ultimate needs. And I victimized her myself. But it was being challenged that way that suddenly forced my mind to start thinking in a different direction. I started to realize that my automatic thinking, as far as like, if you do this, then I'm going to do that. If you do A, I'm doing B. I realized that that was something I was taught. So that meant it was something I could change. And that's where the work started for me, the rehabilitation.
Wow.
You know, I think there might be like 3 parts to this though. And I'd love to hear your thoughts, Artie, man. Always love talking to you, brother, man. Like, I feel like I always walk away with like such a unique perspective and I always walk away knowing something. So, we'll just stick to like the example of like the 2 police officers being killed. For me, this is how I view it is there's 3 parts to this solution. The first of which is what are we going to do to stop this from happening again, right? Like, what are we going to do to either pour into that community or maybe that group of people who feel some sort of way against the police? What are we going to do to fix that problem to prevent this from happening again? The second part of that solution that I believe exists is we do have to remove this person. Like, I feel like we have to remove this person from the environment, from those elements. And then the third thing is we do have to pour into that person. But I guess my question is, who does what? And like, where does what fall on? Because I do believe that person, who killed 2 police officers, should be punished. But I also do believe that there should be some sort of rehabilitation. That's the whole point of going to jail and the system, correct? And I also do believe that something needs to change to prevent these things from happening. And it's, with Chicago, this is the same exact way, right? Like, say person A kills person B in Chicago. Like, what are we going to do to person A when that crime is committed? Are we going to remove that person? Moving after that step, what are we going to do in that community to help prevent this from happening? And then when said person is introduced back into the community, what are we going to do to make sure that person doesn't commit that act again and that they come out, completely healed? So I guess my question is, one, do you agree with that view at all? And 2, if not, like, what do you think are the steps for, just that example, right? Like, person A kills person B. Like, I guess what is the solution in general? And I know that's like a kind of a difficult question, but I feel like that's how we get to these situations where Chicago, people who live in Chicago make statements such as living in Chicago shouldn't come with a death sentence because it just snowballs and snowballs and snowballs. And then you find yourself in a situation like, how do we end up here?
Yeah, I 100% believe that what you're saying. Well, go ahead, Ryan.
I was going to ask you too, Artie, to add on to AJ's question is like, I almost feel like there's got to be a disruption with the internal criminal justice side of things, meaning a lot of stories that I've heard, books that I've read, people that I've talked to, the systematic programming inside of those 4 walls, and I'm talking about prison here, it's so bad. I mean, racism is more alive in the prison system than we've ever seen before. Segregation is so alive like we've seen before. Sexual assaults, I was reading my buddy's book and I told him, I was like, bro, I almost didn't believe what you were saying because the way I'm reading it was like, man, I can't imagine going into a system like that because I wouldn't know how to survive. But we've allowed, like, the system is it's programmed in such a demonic way that it's almost hard to see how a person will be able to get rehabilitated in that environment. And it's almost like a miracle if you just so happen to be that one person that is able to survive it. And so with that condition, I don't necessarily. So although, like AJ said, I do believe that a person should be removed because they've shown like, hey, look, you're not safe to be out here right now. Because By
Yeah.
you being out here on the streets, somebody is going to either yourself or somebody else is going to suffer. But when we take you out of this environment, we put you in between these four walls, we have to figure out a way to get you to start to think and understand what the real world, going back to Artie's point earlier, what the real world looks like. This is what the real world looks like. This is how you're supposed to function. And I understand that you may not have had this training growing up. I understand that you may not have had a dad in your life. I understand that you may have learned what is to be a gamer, but that's not what real life is. This is what the real world is. And now we have to teach you what it's like to go out and be a man. But you can't necessarily do that unless you just so happen to get lucky and are put in a position where you find the right person, the right mentor, or you find the right environment that is conducive for you to learn like that. What I've been taught and what I've learned and what I've seen is like that doesn't really exist much in the prison system. And correct me if I'm wrong, or I may be completely off base, but that's at least in my knowledge of it, that's kind of what I've seen. And that kind of shows why people can't rehabilitate the way they need to rehabilitate.
Yeah, so I think what you both are saying, like just to talk about all of it, basically, it's there's some hard truths to all of this because the reality, the real world that we're living in right now is one that is ripe for crime and criminality. It is, and it always has been, because we live in a trauma-based, oppressive society, and as long as we do that, you're always going to have people that feel like they need to resort to those means in order to have value, in order to make money, A, B, and C, right? When I went away, it was nearly impossible for me to begin my steps towards rehabilitation, because the system, as you said, is just not designed that way. So what I would say to AJ's point is remove for the safety has to be done, right? They get sentenced, they get put into prison. What happens to them once they're there? Because as you said, Ryan, once we're there, it's 1952 again, and we got segregated faucets, segregated showers. It's white on black violence. It's black on brown violence. It's gang politics. It's all these things when you go in there, and it makes it very difficult for someone to come out of that changed and better off than when they went in. In fact, it's very possible that someone could come out worse, and I've seen it happen. We all have. You guys have
Absolutely.
arrested many
Absolutely.
people
Yeah,
that
yep.
have gotten worse, right?
That's true. Yep.
Every time you see them, they got more tattoos and they're just a little more dangerous.
Learned a little bit more about
savvy, learned a little bit more. And the reason why is because they're better. Well, they're trained all right, but they're not trained by the people you would want them to be trained by. And so what happens to them when they are in there is very important. But what we are running up against is a very human condition, which is, why should I make your life any easier because you committed a crime? I just want you to suffer for what you've done. You've committed a crime. Now you got to do the time. You shouldn't have a TV. You're lucky you got toilet paper. You should feel the vengeance and the pain of what it means to be incarcerated. But the problem with that is you're not making the long-term investment in someone who is definitely going to come back out into society again. And two, it's an ego. It's an ego block that's preventing you from as a human from doing what's necessary to have the future that you want. It's very human, and it's very much the way that we operate out here in society. I've been in society for almost 7 years now, and most people, they just don't have that forgiving heart. They don't have that compassion. They don't have that empathy. There's no, I'm trying to see it your way, or there's none of that. It's literally just hatred and like, and a lust for violence and justice. So it requires you to actually get beyond that to create the systemic, to create the system that it needs to be in place for that. So then when you come home, where are you coming home to? Here's the crazy part, man, is that the society that all three of us here want people to live in, like Chicago, for example, right? It's not a fantasy world that there's no such thing as a place where there's less crime and there's less criminality. We all have neighborhoods where we're from. We know where they are. And there's manicured lawns, and there's like 3 cops in the whole place, and there's no crime.
Ryan lived there.
Yeah, Ryan lives there. But I mean,
on weekends.
When I drive through there, it also occurs to me, wow, that place actually does exist.
Mm-hmm.
And there is no crime, and people do graduate from high school, and their kids do go to college, and they do end up having great lives. So it's possible,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not happening in Watts, and it's not happening in Compton, and it's not happening out where AJ deals with it.
Mm-hmm.
So why is that? And that right there, the answer to that question is the tough one, because that requires all of us to have a really difficult conversation about why that exists and the other exists as well.
I'll be honest with you, Artie, man. I struggle with that mindset. I've said it on podcasts before. I've used the example of, there are places in the world where if you steal, they chop your hand off. And what you don't see are a lot of people missing 2 hands, right? Because they know, like, I did it once, my hand's gone. I'm definitely not going to do that again. And that logic makes a lot of sense to me. It truly does. But in the same breath, I 1000% like understand like where you're coming from. So even when like Ryan was talking after I got done, and he used my example of like removing somebody, and he's like, yeah, we have to remove them to make sure that they're better. In my head, even as he was just talking, I'm like, well, yeah, like that, and for punitive reasons, right? Like I want it to be punitive as well. And this is just me being 100% transparent because I think that the listeners deserve
punitive is human. It is.
Yeah, it definitely is, man. And it's not even, for me, I struggle with it, especially as a Christian, right? Like I wholeheartedly, like I will admit that I struggle with this as a believer in Jesus Christ. Like I 100% admit that. But the reason why is, I care so much, man. I care so much about the community that I was born and raised in, that I work at every single day. So when I see people just taking advantage of that community, it's like, man, like I want you to pay for what you did. But as we sit here and have this conversation, like you're right, and I'm man enough to admit it. Like you are 100% right. Like if I truly cared and took a step back and put the thought into like, man, like what can we do to make this better? I do think it's a combination. I do think it's a combination of like, I can't just want this person to pay. Like, okay, well he shot somebody. He's getting 5 to 10 years. Give him the 10, judge, because you're right. And I never really thought about this. After those 10 years, what? He's coming back to that community where his family lives, where he was born and raised. And is he going to come back rehabilitated? I think we know the statistics of the likelihood of that happening. So you're right, man. And you are absolutely right. And I'm glad you said that, because I never really heard anybody put it the way that you just did.
You know what's funny, AJ, is like me and Artie have talked several times off podcasts, obviously.
Right.
And I very much like you was very in that mindset as you, like, no, but there's got to be a punishment. And I think what I've come to realize, and even hear Artie out, is Artie's not saying that there shouldn't be any punishment. I'm not saying, even if you look at it from a Christian standpoint, the way I look at it is like, even God, there's punishment with God. Like if we do something, there's punishment.
Right.
But the part that we lack as human beings a lot of times is we forget that although there is punishment, we forget that there's also equally grace and mercy.
Yes.
And we forget that aspect of it. We also forget that there's also forgiveness tied to it. And so I think in our minds, we think that it's got to be this way and we can't have the other way. And I think you can have both, meaning that the punishment is, you're going to go away. It's, I mean, imagine this. If I was removed from society today and had to go away from my family, that in and of itself would be punishment for me, because I'm like, man, like, I'm away from the people I love. I can't do what I want to do. Like I'm on somebody else's time. Like that in and of itself would be bad.
Yeah.
But the other part is like Artie's referring to, is when that time happens that person does get out, did we prepare them enough to re-enter society and not make the same mistake twice?
Right.
And so I was able to see our side is because I had to look through it from a Christian lens and remember that some of the most, think about this, if we go to the Bible or whatever, you look at the Apostle Paul. That dude, before he became the Apostle Paul, he was murdering Christians. That's what he did. And he himself went on a lot. He was murdering people, very barbaric type stuff. And God went on and used him to go and become the apostle that almost wrote almost all the new books in the New Testament.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, that is a lens that a lot of us forget. That even though he did all that stuff, God made him a new man. That's when he became the Apostle Paul.
Right.
And now he was able, that's what rehabilitation looks like. You know what I mean? But it didn't come with, but if you look at his journey, Saul at all, it came with some punishment. God actually punished him.
Yeah.
And
that's why he's such a great example. He's such a great example of what you're saying, because the reason why I'm here now sitting in front of you guys is because at some point someone punished me. They did. So I went through that punishment, but they also challenged my perception, my perspectives, my beliefs. They challenged the way I was thinking and the way I saw the world. And then they poured into me the wisdom that they had. And wisdom, what is wisdom if it's not learning from experience?
Yeah.
Right. So those two things were done for me. Those two things are core tenets straight from Jesus Christ. And it's what he did. He poured into his apostles. Now you have to remember, I read the Bible up and down how many times because I did so much time, right? So I'm a big fan of Jesus Christ. And Jesus,
like, hey, this is the first time.
Yeah, his teachings. And then later when they went on and the apostles went to do their writings in Romans and Corinthians and whatnot, they spoke about all of these things, right? And he poured into them that wisdom. And that's what's lacking. The reason I'm here is simply because other guys in blue like me decided, well, we're going to form a group because it doesn't exist here. So we'll just form a group and we'll process and we'll cry together and we'll talk about what happened to us and how we got to this point. The system didn't give that to me. Other guys in blue did.
Yeah.
And that's why there's not more of me, because if the system did it rather than just some guys getting together on the yard, if it was actually culturally what the system was about, you would have more arties on the street. But you don't. It's just when someone like me randomly ends up somewhere where they just happen to have a group. And that is what we're missing, man. So it is definitely, we have to keep the community safe. But as Jesus would do, we need to pour into the person after. They need to know what they did wrong and what they can do about that now. And we need the families to know you're not forgotten because of this. If anything, the result of this crime is a better person who's going to lead to harm reduction.
Yeah, that's what true healing actually, if you really think about it, that's what true healing would be for the victim. Because again, I didn't even think about this. Like, if you look at it from that perspective, the victim is okay, yeah, this person got 25 years to life or whatever. But if I really wanted true justice, it would be to know that that person did this terrible thing, he got rehabilitated, and now he's helping prevent others from doing the same thing, so that way there doesn't need to be additional victims. Now I've never been in that situation as a victim, so again, take this with a grain of salt. But in my mind, if I did have to put myself in that position, that's where I would feel like, you know what? I know it would suck that my loved one is gone because this person selfishly took them away. But at the same time, he has now been rehabilitated and he's out there helping others to prevent them from other people being victimized like that. That would be what justice, redemption, forgiveness, all encompassing. That's what I think the perfect society would look like. AJ, I know you were going to say something. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to ask Artie, but I think he already answered it. I was going to ask you if at some point during your like transition, did you have somebody like who believed in you? Like, did you have somebody like cheering you on and rooting, like, man, you got this, you could do it? And I feel like you kind of answered that, but I'll let you answer it, and then I'll tell you
for sure. I had my own mentor like you did. He was my sponsor, and he took me through the 12 steps, and he definitely cheered me on from outside. And he was my connection to outside world. And, he basically was like, not only can you make it out here, but then you can make it once you're out here.
Right.
It can still be done. And listen, man, we're talking about accountability also at the ground level, boots on the ground level accountability.
Yep.
My change has led to me going back to my community and telling the people who would kill a cop, Guys, there's another way. You don't have to be living like this.
Right.
They're hearing it from someone that looks like them,
Yeah.
that comes from where they come from.
Yeah.
I could not have been in this place, though, if I would not have transformed.
Mm-hmm.
So accountability has levels, but we all have to invest in it. It can't just be about the punishment. Otherwise, I never go back to my community. I never get out. More people get hurt.
Yeah.
And it sucks because I'm not trying to blame innocent people out there and say it's your fault this is happening. I'm not trying to do that. I'm just saying
I don't think people are taking that.
I'm glad because it's personal accountability, but then it's also societal accountability and like how we as human beings can really nurture each other, man.
I've got this. I don't know if you guys can read this shirt I've got on, but it's, it's just, I don't know. God works in funny ways sometimes, man. So the shirt I have on is from my church. And we actually had like this series where we were just talking about like, being Christ-like, and you just really pouring into our specific group of guys, because we had the group of guys, they were some knuckleheads, and they just needed a little bit more attention. But we came up with this saying, and I don't know if you could read it. Let me move this microphone out the way, but it says, be a lamp or lifeboat or ladder. And, it's exactly what we're talking about. Like, like be the light in someone's very dark world. Be the lifeboat when somebody is drowning, like to come to their rescue. Be a ladder, like help somebody up from the position that they're in. And I can't help but think about the contrast of my mentality being a police officer, how sometimes I get away from that and confuse the two, admittingly, especially having this conversation. But the reason I asked if you had somebody who believed in you and just like really cheered and like rooted you on is, that's what really got me here. Is that person who like really believed in me, but believed in me for the right reasons, and that I could do the right things. Because growing up, I had a lot of people who believed in me, like, but for the wrong things. Like, man, I believe AJ is the craziest dude around. Like, he always got a gun on him. When some stuff pop off, he gonna be in my corner. And because of that belief, it really like fueled the fire that was burning at the time, and it was to be that person that people believed that I was, and I lived up to that standard. Like, if I'm getting into a fight, I know AJ's gonna have my back. You were right. You were absolutely right. Back then, I was gonna have your back, but it's because you believed I was gonna have your back. And the moment that I met somebody who truly believed in me, don't get me wrong, like my mother believed in me, but my mother was busy, right? Like she worked 3 jobs her entire life, was going through a lot, right? Just trying to get us from point A to point B. When I finally had somebody who would like sit down with me and believe in me and like pour into me, and I believed that they believed in me to do the right things, that was really the change for me. Like, okay, I got to make this man proud. Like, not only do I got to make him proud, but now that he sees it in me, I kind of see it in myself too. So like, I can't see myself being a police officer. I can't see myself standing out. I can't see myself pouring into the community. I can't see myself doing this. I love it, man. Like I just love this conversation, man. Like I love the dialogue, and I love just working towards a common goal.
Yeah,
one thing, and as we start to wrap this thing up, I want to encourage people, like the only way you're able to get to this place and see it through this lens is you got to practice forgiveness on a regular. Like it takes small little things that happen in your life or people that have wronged you or whatever to work on forgiving them. Because once you learn how to forgive them, then it allows you to kind of see, like, it not only does it free you, is it freeing for you, and it allows you to walk around with a little bit less stress, but it's freeing for them. And it allows you to, on the bigger things, already have something to pull back from and say, I know what it's like. I know how it is to forgive people. So it makes it easier to forgive that person. Ultimately, for me as a Christian, I always think about how God has forgiven me for many of the things I've done. But
man,
at that point, it's hard for us to get to that point because we are human. And that's one of the things I really appreciate about my relationship with Artie, my relationship with Leon, and obviously AJ and Billy. But Artie has challenged me to think differently, and and just so you guys know, we have had our disagreements. Artie knows, AJ knows. We've had our disagreements, but it was a healthy disagreement. You know what I mean? And at first, it might be weird because, like, man, you know what? Like friendships, we always think that we're always supposed to think alike, agree on everything. But a true healthy friendship somebody's got to bring different perspectives to you in order for us to grow together as friends or as brothers or whatever it is. And so we've gone through those challenges, but I think we've grown from them. And what Artie has done for me in my life is you have allowed me, Artie, to look at things from a holistic approach. I got caught up, kind of like AJ was talking about earlier. I genuinely got caught up in thinking this person needs punishment. They don't deserve this. They don't deserve that. They took a life. They did this. They did that. Punishment. And like I said, although I'm gonna get you off here soon, Artie, because I don't want to get you in trouble.
So good.
But although I still believe that a person does need a level of punishment. There's a punitive I think punitive or punishment is just a part of the process, but it's not the entire process. Yeah. Our system has made punishment the entire process without anything that comes after. And so if we really wanted to work on rehabilitation in our system, we have to recognize punishment as just being a part of the process, not the entire process. And I think that's what I've learned from Artie is that, okay, punishment has its place, but what comes after that? What comes during the process? And once you get out of that place, okay, we've removed them. Now let's start thinking about how do we fix this person? How do we repair this person? Because we got to remember that these people that are committing crimes, they're still a person's son. They're still a person's daughter. They're still a person's cousin, mom, dad, whoever it is. They are still human beings. And so if it was one of your family members, you wouldn't want the rest of society to give up on them. That's why you see family members. That's why you see mom and dads still sitting in the courtrooms, even though their son or daughter has just committed a heinous act because it's their son or daughter. And so we have to have that same perspective when we're looking at, okay, do I still have the heart for this person to receive the change, and do I not want I don't want the system to give up on them. Yeah, we focus on the victims as we should because they're victims, and there's not a single thing that we can do to try to even empathize or feel what they're going through because it's impossible unless you're going through it. But although we still focus on them, we shouldn't forget about the other person in the other equation, because I think one of the conclusions that I came to through this conversation is that a lot of times that person is going to reenter society. And when they do reenter society, have we done what we can to repair them so that way they don't go back, like the Bible talks about, return to their own vomit? So that's just my last parting words. AJ, what's your last parting thoughts? And then Artie, I'm gonna end with you, or Billy, if you guys have any last parting thoughts. But I'm gonna go to AJ, then we'll go to Artie, then we'll wrap it up. Go ahead.
I mean, I think this is just a true testament of what we preach so much. This is why it is important to have not only friendships with people who don't have the same views as you, but to have like conversations with people who don't have the same views as you, because you are bound to learn something eventually. And, as Ryan said, like we've disagreed before, but those disagreements never really turned into arguments and I hate you and I don't want to talk to you anymore, or you're stupid, or, anything like that. And I feel like that's, we've gotten to that point as a society where that's almost the norm, right? If we disagree with somebody, they're stupid. They don't understand what's going on. Like they can't comprehend what I'm trying to explain to them. When that's not the reality. So, my last tidbit is step out of your comfort zone, have conversations with people who don't look like you, who don't think like you, who have lived completely different lives than you, and you'll be surprised like where you end up in life.
That's good. Billy, before we go to Artie, anything?
I was just gonna ask.
No, just Artie, just thank you. Every time you've come on, kind of like Ryan said, I always leave a little different. So I really appreciate you and how you communicate.
Thanks, brother.
Billy took off some of his very conservative type stuff, right?
Billy just punching the air in the background. Like, oh.
That's okay. I'm not scared of the Fox News shirt. It's all right. I ain't going nowhere.
I'm not cheering anyone on.
I'm just messing around. Artie, man, go ahead. What are some of your last parting thoughts before we leave?
I'm really grateful to you guys for inviting me and for having the courage to have a conversation like this. I mean, to step into the arena, at least we're asking the questions, right? Like, what more can we do and what can be done? And I feel like that's always the best starting point, is just having the courage to ask the question in the room and name that elephant in the first place. So cheers to you guys. I'm always happy to come here. I'm going to say this again for everybody. Like, however you feel about who I am and the crime I committed and the time that I did, if you're listening to this, just know that there's still choice there. There's still a personal choice that can be made about how you choose to see the world. And it doesn't have to be shaped by me, and it doesn't have to be influenced by me. And you can still feel the way you feel about me. But just know this, I'm still going to love you no matter what. You're still going to be a human being to me. I'm still going to love you. I would still lay down my life to protect yours. And that is the difference. And if we had more of that in this society, we would definitely have less crime. But because the goal is not a reduction of crime, it's a reduction of harm. The goal of reduction of crime is simply a side effect of a changed society. So we have to ask ourselves, what more can we do we talked about pouring into individuals today. How can I pour into society? How can I pour into community? A little bit different, just a little bit more, and actually make that ultimate change. So this is just a call to action to anybody that's listening to this. Like,
there you go.
I'm a being of love, and I like to dance, and I like to shake my booty, and and have a good time. You know what I mean?
I'd be like,
But
I'd be back.
yeah, I like to do that. And I'm a father, and I have to really think about the world that my daughter's going to come up in, and I also want her to be proud of the man that I've become. But I also want to be honest with her about where I started. And I think we can all have these conversations in our households. I also want my daughter to know that if somebody ever harms us, I'm going to feel that anger and I'm going to feel that resentment. But ultimately, I'm going to want it to never happen again. So I may have to get past myself a little bit for that to happen. Anyway, I love you all. I wish you all growth and peace and love,
that's
man.
good, Artie. I appreciate it, man. I think that there needs to be more of that right now, especially with everything going on in society right now. Obviously, that we didn't talk about Roe v. Wade today, but one of the things I do know with Roe v. Wade, and again, I'm not gonna get sidetracked with my
and we're gonna get some podcasts, but let's talk about Roe v.
for
Wade.
Another
real
hour
quick,
and a
y'all.
half. Here we go.
I'm gonna
I need
hit
some
that
coffee.
ending music here. Here we go. All right.
Really. Well, what I will say real quick is that regardless of what side of the fence people are on, there's got to be a level of grace, mercy, and love regardless. I understand, like I had definitely have my personal feelings on it. A lot of my stuff is based on my beliefs and my spiritual side of things, but it doesn't negate the fact that you shouldn't have love, mercy, and for other people. And one of the things I've seen lately is probably been the most nastiest, ugliest things I've seen. I mean, there are legitimately people calling Clarence Thomas the N-word, Nigger, calling him this and that, and stuff on the other side of the fence as well. So no matter what no matter what political affiliation you're with, something should never get to the point where it causes you to be just as bad as the person you're accusing of whatever they're doing. You know what I mean? There should always be a level of grace, love, mercy that covers it all. You believe what you believe. I believe what I believe, and in my opinion, we're all going to have to answer one day. But at the same time, we shouldn't be spewing hate and all this other stuff, because you're no better than the next person who you think is doing wrong, no matter how you view whatever's going on. So only reason I brought that up is because that same type of mindset kind of goes into this whole thing we talked about today, is when you view it through that lens, when you view things through this whole idea of having grace, having mercy, having forgiveness, having love for people, it makes you think about things a little bit more differently than we're programmed to think. And somebody in the comment section said earlier, we got to be able to reprogram this thought process in order to rehabilitate. And I think that's how you reprogram yourself, is through things through that lens. So StreamYard is acting up anyway, so it's cutting us off. But Billy, go ahead and cue up the music. Hey, we love you guys. We appreciate you. We may break this up into 2 parts. I'm not sure. If we do, just subscribe to the next part. But with that being said, we love y'all, and we'll see y'all next week. Peace.
Savage on the set, AJ. What up, boy? Ryan Tillman. Let him